It was a Sunday peculiarly suited to murder, so Lord Peter Wimsey observed to Bunter, as their Bentley climbed the last incline into the damp, wind-swept reaches of North Riding. The fog lay about the moors like a sleeping dog with consumption, wheezing sullenly at the hedgerows, and the village of Alderby-on-Staithe emerged from the gloom like something drawn in faint pencil and hastily erased. "A perfectly nasty piece of weather, Bunter," said Wimsey, his monocle fogging with cheerful inevitability. "If there's not a corpse waiting for us by tea-time, I shall be grievously disappointed in the county constabulary." "There is, my lord," said Bunter imperturbably, "a telephone call from Chief Inspector Umpleby this morning. He used the word peculiar no less than 5 times. Splendid. One does like a little peculiarity with one's parsnips." Wimsey's voice drifted upward. "Nothing so dreary as an ordinary death. I dare say it's a case of suicide via radium, toothpaste, or perhaps arsenic in the nutmeg grater. They arrived, in fact, to find something considerably less decorative and rather more perplexing. The house in question, the Rookery, sat with obdurate charm at the edge of the village, an 18th-century pile with a widow's walk and decaying turrets, once the home of a naval commodore, and lately the domain of Miss Honoria Gillingham, spinster, and sometime writer of spiritualist romance. It was Miss Gillingham who had been found dead that morning, propped curiously in her escritoire chair, with not a mark on her and a half-written letter beside her, the nib of her fountain pen still damp with ink. Though no writing appeared on the page, Wimsey peered down at the parchment through his monocle. "She appears to have composed something," he murmured, and then regretted it so thoroughly she struck it from existence. Or perhaps she merely believed in a very private form of correspondence. "The page is blank," said Chief Inspector Umpleby, a ruddy-cheeked man whose moustache trembled when he was cross. "It's not a suicide note, it's not a poem, it's not even a blasted shopping list. But the housekeeper swears she saw her write it last night. Furious she was, talking to herself, saying something about changing everything." "Changing everything?" Wimsey repeated, delicately lifting the page to the window. "Curious. That rather smacks of a codicil. And what has become of the will, pray?" "Locked in the safe, quite intact," said Umpleby. "Dated 3 years ago. Bequeaths everything, house, land, the royalties from Shadows of the Seance, to her niece, Miss Lydia Gillingham." "Ah," said Wimsey with relish. "But not, I take it, written in lemon juice." Umpleby stared. "I beg your pardon?" "Never mind, Chief Inspector. Merely wondering whether Miss Gillingham was given to espionage or invisible ink, either of which would lend a delightful Gothic spice to the business. Tell me, who discovered the body?" "The housemaid, Agnes Finch. Came in this morning with the tea tray. Says the door was unlocked but the latch stiff. The window was open, which she says is odd because Miss Gillingham was terrified of draughts and chilblains. And there was a smell in the air. Smell. Like herbs, or something burnt. Not unlike invisible ink," murmured Wimsey. "Vanilla, cloves, vinegar, it depends on the substance. May I have this page sent round to Bunter? He keeps a bottle of hydrochloric acid for just such contingencies." "And the time of death?" he added, stepping closer to the deceased. "Somewhere between 10 and midnight. The doctor's vague. There's no sign of forced entry, no bruises, no broken glass, no visible wound." "Which suggests, of course," said Wimsey brightly, "that someone was expected, or invisible, or extremely tidy." He turned his gaze back to the escritoire, squinting down at a curious glint near the inkwell. "Hello, what have we here?" He took a small paperweight between his fingers. Not glass, not crystal, a lump of quartz perhaps. Rather cloudy, for a mystic, and yes, warm to the touch. "Quartz," said Umpleby, unimpressed. She was a spiritualist after all. "Indeed," said Wimsey. "Let us hope she does not return to give us further instructions." He straightened with a sigh. "Well, Bunter, I believe we are in for a pleasant week. A country house, a death that isn't quite anything, a missing document, and a niece who inherits under the precise conditions the deceased may have intended to alter. Delicious. Shall I unpack the evening suit, my lord?" "Certainly. And the microscope, if you please." Wimsey glanced once more at the page that should have borne last words. "Quis custodiet ipsos custodes?" he murmured. Then, as Umpleby looked blank, he added, Juvenile. Who watches the watchers? I suppose in this case we shall have to. The tea at the Rookery was taken with a sort of nervous rigidity, as though the house itself held its breath. The parlour, all chintz and spiritualist bibelots, offered little comfort. Porcelain figurines of sorrowful angels peered down from the mantel, while a collection of antique candlesticks huddled like conspirators on a mahogany sideboard. Wimsey, having just endured a well-meaning scone with the consistency of a roofing tile, sat opposite the niece, Miss Lydia Gillingham, her eyes red-rimmed, but otherwise remarkably self-possessed. "I suppose," she said quietly, "you'll want to speak to the staff." "Oh, I always do," said Wimsey, sipping his tea. "They tend to be much more observant than the average relative, less sentimental, more exact about times and noises in the night." She did not rise to the bait. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap, the fingers slender, twitching only slightly. "You think someone murdered Aunt Honoria?" "I think someone found her very inconvenient at precisely the wrong moment," said Wimsey pleasantly. "But whether murder was involved, or mere misadventure with tinctures of invisible ink, we shall see." She gave a soft, mirthless chuckle. "She was inconvenient. I loved her in a way, but she was always twisting things, suggesting someone had moved her memory or disturbed the astral record. We never knew when she meant something literally or not. And lately she had been odd even by her standards." "How so?" "She kept her study door locked, kept mumbling about messages from the other side. But then, she always did that. I just thought she'd grown more fanciful, or frightened." "Of what precisely?" Lydia hesitated. "She said someone had been in the house at night, but there were never any signs. The larder was untouched, nothing stolen. She was always forgetting where she left things. One day the door to the attic was open, and she insisted it had been shut since 1928. A séance gone wrong, she said. Ghosts, or a wronged spirit, or, well, nothing you'd believe." "Ghosts rarely produce changes in legal documents," Wimsey said, rising. "But I've known a few wills influenced by spooks of a very terrestrial nature. Might I trouble you to ask Miss Finch to join me in the study?" The housemaid, when summoned, appeared in the threshold with the air of someone prepared to be blamed for absolutely anything from murder to mildew. She was a woman in her early 30s, with perpetually damp cuffs and the expression of one long-denied pudding. "It was me what found her, sir," she said as soon as she was seated on the edge of a Victorian occasional chair upholstered in unwelcoming horsehair. "Came in with the tray as usual, 7:15. Fire had burned low. She was sitting up like she was about to say summit. I says, 'Miss?' But she didn't answer." Wimsey steepled his fingers. "Had she been expecting anyone?" "The previous evening?" "Not to my knowledge, sir. Miss Gillingham didn't like company after dark, not since the Reverend Ingram told her she had an aura vulnerable to twilight spirits." Wimsey blinked. "I imagine that presented considerable inconvenience in winter. She took all her visitors before luncheon, sir." "And was there anything unusual last night?" Miss Finch frowned. "Only the smell. A strange one, like them little sticks Miss buys from the apothecary shop in Whitby. Sandalwood or something." "Queer like that. I opened the window straight away. Of course, how long did it take to get help?" "Well, I sent Peter, he's the gardener's boy, running to fetch the doctor, and he called the constable. Mr. Gerald came up straight away. Said nothing was out of place, but Miss's face had gone a funny colour. Not blue, not pale, sort of greyish-green, like lichen on a gravestone." "Very poetic," murmured Wimsey. "Did Miss Gillingham take any regular medications?" "No, sir, not unless you count the valerian and the odd clove of garlic. For spirit fortitude. Said she had a delicate astral body." Wimsey stood and wandered toward the fireplace, where a single iron poker leaned at a disagreeable angle. He picked it up, examined the end. "Cold. Tell me," he said. "Was this room always arranged this way?" Miss Finch blinked. I don't follow. The desk, the chairs, the rug." "Yes, sir." "Miss liked everything just so, hated things being moved." "And yet," said Wimsey lightly, "there are ghostly marks in the dust beside the hearth, where a small table clearly once stood, and the hearthrug is 2 inches short of the ash line on the left. I swept in here only yesterday." "I'm sure you did. but unless you swept in perfect lines like a Japanese monk, I don't think those impressions are yours." She began to protest, but Wimsey silenced her with a kind look. "Tell, did Miss Gillingham often write at night?" "Not often. Her best hours were before tea. That's when she did her receivings. Automatic writing. Something like that." Wimsey turned back to the desk. The page was still there, a second copy having already been sent by Bunter to a chemist in York for analysis. "I take it no one has found any writing, concealed, erased or otherwise, since this morning?" "No, sir." He nodded. "Very well. Please ask the gardener to come in." The gardener, Mr. Wood, was a creature of soil and suspicion. His eyes were small, hedged in by weather and experience, and he spoke as though each word had to be coaxed reluctantly from its bed. "Miss was fond of her herbs," he said when prompted. "Wouldn't let me near her little patch by the greenhouse. Grew all sorts, angelica, mugwort, vervain, foreign things. Did she harvest them herself?" "Usually. Sometimes she'd make the boy do it. She'd burn 'em too, smelt like sin on a Sunday. And last night?" "Didn't see her. Heard a sound, though." Wimsey perked up. "What sort of sound?" "A sort of bell. Tinkly, like one of them little brass ones, don't know where from." "At what time?" "About 11:15, just before the fog came in thick." Wimsey's eyes brightened, but he only murmured, "Thank you," and dismissed the man. Back in the parlour, Bunter awaited him with calm dignity and a small folder. "Initial test suggests lemon juice, my lord." "Ah," said Wimsey, "then she did write something." "Indeed, the laboratory will confirm within the day, but heat from the lamp revealed faint traces of letters, something about revoking former testament and to bequeath instead. Unto, then the rest is smudged." "Smudged?" "Yes, my lord, as though someone had attempted to destroy the message after revealing it." Wimsey looked thoughtful. So the ink was there. She meant it to be found, but not immediately. A will in invisible ink is a paradox. Why conceal it at all if one intends it to be valid? "Unless," said Bunter, "one intended it to be revealed only in the event of foul play." Wimsey smiled slowly. "Precisely." He paced to the window and looked out upon the encroaching fog. Someone saw her writing, or suspected she would write. Someone who understood just enough of her methods to panic, and to erase clumsily what they could. There was a knock at the door. Umpleby entered, his expression caught between satisfaction and irritation. "We've just received word. The solicitor in Whitby confirms that Miss Gillingham requested a new will template last week, but it was never returned." Wimsey nodded. "Because she intended to write it herself, privately, safely, and yet—" He glanced at the letter again, then at the rug. His gaze drifted to the hearth. "Bunter," he said, "bring me a candle. We're going to warm that patch of floor." "Looking for ghosts, my lord?" "No," said Wimsey. "Something even. More frightening, evidence." The flame from the candle flickered uncertainly as Wimsey and Bunter bent over the hearthrug. The wool fibres, once cold and unremarkable, began to reveal a curious patchwork of faint discolorations when warmed. Slightly darker square where the ash had gathered, and most intriguingly, a subtle imprint beneath the surface, almost imperceptible without the heat. "Curious," murmured Wimsey, tapping the hearth lightly with the candle's handle. "This rug has been disturbed recently, too recently for a household so fastidious. It's too short for the hearth, as I noted. But this shape, this square, suggests a missing object, perhaps a small table, or more likely, a chest or box." "Is there a trapdoor beneath?" Umpleby asked, peering over the detective's shoulder with his usual mixture of hope and skepticism. "Exactly the sort of question I was hoping you would ask, Inspector." Wimsey's smile was faint, but sharp. "Bunter, a handkerchief if—" "You please." Bunter produced the expected linen square from his waistcoat pocket. Wimsey crouched carefully, brushing aside the edge of the rug, revealing a well-worn wooden floorboard, no different to the rest except for a faint groove in its perimeter. "Lift it gently," Wimsey directed. "We must not disturb whatever secrets are hidden below." With some effort, and a muttered oath from Bunter regarding the state of the floor, the board gave way to reveal a small cavity, just large enough to hold a wooden box of modest dimensions. Wimsey lifted it free, noting immediately the thick layer of dust that coated it. except for a neat rectangle on the lid where something had lain until recently. The box was locked, its mechanism old-fashioned but precise. "Do we have the key?" Wimsey inquired. Miss Lydia, who had followed quietly into the study, produced a small brass key on a ribbon around her neck. Aunt Honoria wore it always, even when she was out in the garden. She said it was the key to her private thoughts. Wimsey took the key and examined it thoughtfully. The lock yielded after a moment's coaxing. Inside the box was a neatly folded parchment, yellowed, with age and a small bundle wrapped in oilskin. Wimsey took the parchment first, unfolding it carefully. "An old will by the look of it," he said, reading the faded script aloud. "I, Honoria Gillingham, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all former wills and codicils and bequeath my estate unto my niece Lydia Gillingham, except the sum of £100 to my servant Agnes Finch, in gratitude for her loyal service." He folded the paper with precision and turned to the oilskin bundle. "This is something different," he murmured, unwrapping the bundle to reveal a small vial filled with a faintly yellow liquid and a note written in a firm but elegant hand, to "Be opened only in the event of my untimely death," Bunter leaned in. "In other words, a poison?" Wimsey shook his head. "No, a tincture perhaps. Something medicinal, valerian maybe, or an herbal extract." Miss Lydia paled. Aunt Honoria was always wary of her health. She kept strange remedies, things from old herbalists or her travels abroad. "Remarkable," said Wimsey, "and the timing of this discovery is fortunate. For now, we have not only a motive, but a timeline to consider." He looked to the inspector. "Last night, before her death, Miss Gillingham was attempting to alter her will by invisible ink. We know that much. But she also concealed an older will here, unchanged for years, which gives a specific bequest to her servant." Umpleby frowned. "Are you suggesting that someone wanted to prevent the new will from surfacing?" "Exactly. And the servant's share might be the key to understanding the murderer's motive." Miss Finch looked suddenly nervous. I wouldn't want to believe it, sir, but I did hear talk from the housekeeper, Mrs. Cartwright. She's been uneasy since the old will surfaced. Said Miss Lydia might lose everything." Wimsey folded his hands, considering. "And what of the housekeeper herself? Has she been questioned?" "She was, but she claims ignorance," said Umpleby. "Says she only came to work here 6 months ago." "Curious timing," said Wimsey. "It would be a pity if this ignorance were a veil." He turned to Lydia. "Miss Gillingham, you seem an unlikely candidate for foul play, but you must understand the value of clarity in matters of inheritance. Did you discuss your aunt's new will with anyone?" Lydia shook her head, but her voice trembled. "Only with Aunt Honoria. She was secretive about it. I only learned about the older will when the solicitor called me." "Secretive, you say?" Wimsey's eyes gleamed. "People who write secret wills tend to be afraid of secrets leaking out." "And last night?" Umpleby asked pointedly. "Did you see anyone come or go from the house?" "No," said Lydia quickly. "I was with friends in the village at the cricket pavilion. There's a witness to my presence." Wimsey nodded. "Very good. Alibis, like lies, are rarely perfect." He turned his attention back to the study, where the faint scent of burning herbs lingered. "Tell me again about that bell sound," he said to Miss Finch. "Just before 11, sir. A tinkling noise, like a small brass bell." Wimsey made a mental note. "And the window opened despite Miss Honoria's dislike of draughts." "Yes, sir, I found it so when I came in." "Curious. I wonder if the window was opened deliberately, to let in something or someone." He moved toward the window, examining the latch. "See here," he said, running a finger along the sill. "No signs of forced entry, but the latch is stiff, not fully engaged. It might have been opened from the inside, then left ajar. Could that explain the draught? Possibly, or it could have been a deliberate ploy to suggest an intruder." Wimsey stepped back, eyes narrowing. A door, left unlocked, a window left open, a will written in invisible ink, and a locked box with a concealed older will. Someone wanted the New Testament to remain hidden. But what of the poison vial? He held it up, letting the light catch the pale liquid inside. Could Aunt Honoria have taken something to harm herself, or was she forced? Bunter shook his head. "The doctor said no signs of poisoning, my lord. True enough, but it might have been intended as a threat or a last resort, a warning to those who would tamper with her affairs. Wimsey sighed softly. The story thickens, but the clock is our ally. We must reconstruct last night's movements with precision. I propose we speak once more with those who can place Miss Lydia at the pavilion, and then with the housekeeper, Mrs. Cartwright. As if summoned, the door opened and Mrs. Cartwright appeared. Her visage was stern, her voice clipped. "You wish to see me, my lord?" Wimsey regarded her with courteous detachment. "Indeed, Mrs. Cartwright, I hear you have been troubled by the recent revelations concerning the will." Her eyes flickered, then hardened. "Such matters are distressing, Lord Peter. I am but a humble servant, and I keep to my duties." "And yet you arrived here just 6 months ago, correct?" "Yes, and before that?" "I was at Dunbridge Hall for many years." "Ah, the hall where the late Sir Reginald Marchmont was found dead." "A tragedy," she interrupted. Sharply. Wimsey's gaze was steady. "Indeed, but my interest lies in your connection to the Gillinghams. How did you come to be employed at the Rookery?" Mrs. Cartwright stiffened. "I sought a quieter place." "A quieter place, or a place to watch and wait?" The room held its breath. Mrs. Cartwright said nothing for a moment, then her expression softened. "Miss Honoria was a difficult mistress," she said quietly. "And Lydia, well, she was always impatient with her aunt's eccentricities. Did you ever overhear disagreements between them?" "Rarely, but I suspected the tension beneath the surface. Miss Honoria feared being outmaneuvered. And you?" Mrs. Cartwright's lips pressed thin. "I did what I was told. I have no wish to be involved in scandal." Wimsey nodded. "Of course, but sometimes even the most discreet witness cannot remain silent forever." He stepped toward the door, pausing. "Mrs. Cartwright, I must ask, did you see anyone near the study window last night?" She shook her head. "No, but I heard the bell, like the gardener said." "And?" That was all. Wimsey closed the door gently behind her and turned to the assembled party. "Very well. We have the skeleton of the night, the bell, the open window, the disturbed hearthrug concealing a box and 2 wills, one public, one secret. The question remains, who had the knowledge, the opportunity, and the motive to act?" He looked to Lydia. "Your presence at the pavilion will be checked. Meanwhile, I shall revisit the study and examine once more the curious traces around the inkpot and the letter." Umpleby exhaled. "You think the answer lies in the details?" Wimsey smiled. Faintly, a glint of dry amusement in his eyes. "Invisible ink, Inspector, is not merely a writing trick. It is a metaphor for all things concealed in plain sight, and I intend to uncover every last one of them." The fog beyond the windows deepened, and the night whispered its secrets to the old walls of the Rookery. But Lord Peter Wimsey was listening closely. Wimsey lingered in the study long after the others had retired to their rooms, the candlelight flickering across the scattered papers and the faint traces of invisible ink that still clung stubbornly to the surface of the desk. His fingers traced the outline of the old inkpot, a vessel of delicate porcelain painted with faint blue violets, and his keen mind turned over the strange details of the night once more. The soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to count down the moments, pressing for resolution, while outside the fog wrapped the Rookery in a cold, silent shroud. He reached for the letter, the fragment of new will, and studied the barely discernible letters revealed by heat. "Revoking former testament, bequeath instead unto—" The smudging had not been accidental. Someone had tried to erase these words, though imperfectly. The letter had been meant to emerge, at a certain time, or under a particular circumstance, but not yet. Who would have known of its existence enough to attempt destruction, and who stood to lose the most if it came to light? The faint scent of sandalwood lingered in the air, mingling with the musty odor of old paper and dust. Wimsey's eyes narrowed. The housemaid had mentioned it, the strange fragrance, burning as if from incense or herbal sticks. A deliberate attempt to mask something, or perhaps a clue left unwittingly by the perpetrator. His gaze swept the room again, landing on the hearth where the removed floorboard still lay beside its cavity. Dust motes danced in the candlelight, revealing footprints, barely visible, impressed in the fine layer of ash. Small, delicate yet hurried. Someone had entered here in haste. He knelt and inspected the prints carefully, noting the direction they led, from the study towards the garden door, and then a faint, irregular trail that seemed to dissolve into the night outside. A soft knock at the door startled him, and Bunter entered holding a telegram. "My lord, a message from Whitby." Wimsey took the telegram with a nod of thanks, breaking the seal quickly. "The chemist's report confirms. The invisible ink was made from lemon juice, as suspected. No traces of poison were detected in the vial found within the box, merely an herbal tincture of valerian, intended to soothe anxiety and aid sleep." He folded the telegram and looked toward the door, where the quiet sounds of the household stirred beyond. "Valerian," he murmured. "Miss Honoria sought calm in troubled times, no doubt. Anything else, Bunter?" "Yes, my lord. The solicitor also confirms that the new will was drafted, but never formally witnessed or deposited. Legally, the older will remains in effect." Wimsey's eyes gleamed with renewed determination. "Which means the motive is as clear as ever. Whoever acted last night sought to preserve the status quo, the older will, by preventing the new one from surfacing." He rose and began to pace slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "But there is more." The faint bell sound the gardener and housekeeper both heard, tinkling just before the fog rolled in, suggests a signal, perhaps a call or warning. "Who would need to signal in this house?" Bunter asked, following. "Someone outside or someone inside expecting a visitor? The fog would cloak movements perfectly. And if we are to believe the window was left open deliberately, it might have been used for communication, or even the passage of a small item." Wimsey's mind pieced together the shadows of that evening, the unseen movements, the whispered threats. He felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting. "Let us take stock," he said. "Miss Lydia's alibi must be confirmed with the cricket pavilion. Meanwhile, we will question Mrs. Cartwright once more, and I intend to inspect the garden and greenhouse with a fresh eye." He glanced toward the window, where the fog now lay thick and motionless. "The game is afoot, Bunter." The following morning dawned pale and grey, the sky threatening rain as Wimsey and Bunter set out to the cricket pavilion. The village buzzed quietly with its usual small talk, but under the surface was the nervous tension of a community rattled by death and suspicion. The pavilion was a modest wooden structure on the edge of the green, and inside the scattered remnants of yesterday's match lingered, a forgotten cap, a cracked bat, and the scent of worn leather gloves. Wimsey approached the group of men and women gathered near the refreshment stall, his presence commanding quiet attention. "Good morning," he said. "I am Lord Peter Wimsey, investigating the death of Honoria Gillingham. I understand that Miss Lydia Gillingham was present here last evening?" Several voices spoke at once, then fell into order as a middle-aged man stepped forward, his face ruddy from the chill but earnest. "Yes, my lord. Lydia was here with us, quite clearly. We saw her from about 8:30 until nearly 10. She was chatting with the Reverend Dalton, and then we all had tea before the fog rolled in. Did anyone see her leave after that?" "No, sir. She left only when the fog came thick. We thought she was heading home early." Wimsey nodded thoughtfully. "Can anyone confirm the exact time she departed?" A young woman spoke up. "I did, my lord. I walked home with Lydia. We parted near the crossroads just after 10. "That fits neatly," Wimsey said. "Thank you." As they left the pavilion, Bunter remarked, "It seems her alibi is solid." "Solid enough," Wimsey replied, "but not unassailable. We must still verify the exact time of Miss Honoria's death." Back at the Rookery, Wimsey insisted on a thorough inspection of the garden and greenhouse. The air was damp, the soil soft from recent rains, and the faint aroma of herbs mingled with the scent of earth and wood. The gardener, Wood, joined them reluctantly, his eyes flicking nervously as Wimsey examined the small herb patch. "Angelica, mugwort and vervain," Wimsey mused, crouching to touch the leaves. "Valerian, you say too?" "Yes, my lord." She was very particular about her herbs. Wimsey's gaze settled on a small brass bell lying near the greenhouse door, almost hidden among the fallen leaves. "Is this yours?" he asked. Wood shook his head. "No, sir, found it this morning. Must have fallen from the house." "A bell," Wimsey said slowly. "The signal we heard last night." He pocketed it and stood, glancing toward the greenhouse. "Did Miss Honoria often hold private meetings here. Wood hesitated. Sometimes she liked to be alone with her thoughts. Wimsey's eyes caught the faint trace of footprints in the damp earth, small, hurried, and erratic. Someone came here in the fog, he said. Someone familiar enough to evade notice. He turned to Wood. Did you see anyone, or anything unusual last night? Wood swallowed. No one, sir, but the cat's been restless, hissing at shadows. A faint smile touched Wimsey's lips. Even cats know when the truth is near. The day passed in quiet intensity, and by evening the pieces were aligning. In the study once more, Wimsey sat with Lydia and the household present, including the now visibly uneasy Mrs. Cartwright. I have no doubt, Wimsey began, that the motive for the crime was financial, to preserve an older will that favored certain interests over others. He paused, eyes scanning the group. The new will, written in invisible ink, was discovered too late to save its author. The vial of valerian was not poison, but a last attempt to calm fears. The bell, the open window, the disturbance in the hearthrug, all point to a carefully planned act intended to conceal the truth. He fixed his gaze on Mrs. Cartwright. And yet, there is one question that remains. Who knew enough to attempt erasure of the invisible ink, and why was the message only partially destroyed? Mrs. Cartwright's hands clenched tightly. It was not me, she said sharply. I swear it. Wimsey's tone softened. Perhaps not, but the one who did was desperate. He turned to Lydia. Miss Gillingham, your presence at the pavilion has been confirmed. That is a strong point in your favor. She breathed a small sigh of relief. But the timing of your aunt's final hours remains uncertain. He looked toward Bunter, who produced the doctor's detailed report. Miss Honoria died between 10 and 11 last night, roughly the time you parted from your companion, Lydia. Lydia's face paled. Do you have any enemies here? Wimsey asked gently. She hesitated. Aunt's enemies were not mine, but I feared the housekeeper disapproved of me. Fear is a useful tool for concealment, Wimsey said. He rose, glancing once more at the box and the old will. The next step is clear. A closer look at the correspondence between Miss Honoria and her solicitor, and a thorough search for any additional documents that might explain the true beneficiary of the estate. He faced the room. Until then, every moment counts. The fog will lift, but the shadows remain. And as the household held its breath, Lord Peter Wimsey prepared to peel back the final layers of deception, knowing the answers lay hidden in the faintest traces, the invisible ink, the silent bell, and the whispered secrets of the Rookery. The morning sun, filtered through heavy grey clouds, cast a muted light over the Rookery, as if reluctant to unveil the secrets the fog had so carefully guarded the night before. Lord Peter Wimsey, accompanied by Bunter, sat in the quiet library, a room fragrant with the musk of old leather and aged paper, surrounded by stacks of correspondence and legal documents recently retrieved from the solicitor's archives. The task was tedious but necessary, to pass through the subtle nuances of Miss Honoria's dealings, to uncover the unseen lines in her tangled web of relationships. Bunter, ever meticulous, had arranged the letters chronologically, a neat pile beside the more formal wills and codicils. My lord, he observed, these letters were primarily penned in the last 6 months. A pattern emerges, an anxious tone, appeals for discretion, and frequent references to the matter at hand. Wimsey nodded, his keen eyes scanning the script of a particularly faded letter. Yes, see here, I must insist the arrangements remain confidential, as the balance of the estate hangs precariously upon this accord. A curious phrase, is it not? The lady's mind clearly occupied by more than mere inheritance. He picked up another letter, this one signed only by the solicitor, and read aloud softly, Miss Gillingham, I reiterate my advice to consider the implications of any amendments to your will. The consequences may ripple beyond the obvious. Beneficiaries. A warning or perhaps a threat concealed in civility. Bunter frowned. It suggests an outside party, perhaps someone with vested interest applying pressure. Precisely, Wimsey said, folding the letter carefully. The new will, written in invisible ink, was not merely a caprice but a calculated move, but to what end? The housekeeper's earlier words echoed faintly in his mind, the strange tension beneath the surface civility, the subtle resentments that simmered like embers ready to flare. It was all too human. Possessiveness, jealousy, fear of displacement. The Rookery's elegant facade masked a brittle core. Rising, Wimsey moved to the window and gazed out at the dew-laden gardens, still glistening from last night's drizzle. "Bunter, the chronology is paramount. We know Miss Honoria died between 10 and 11. Lydia's alibi at the pavilion seems sound, but what of others?" Bunter tapped his chin. "The housekeeper, Mrs. Cartwright, claims to have been in her quarters most of the evening, yet her agitation suggests otherwise." Wimsey smiled faintly. "Agitation is a curious thing, not always guilt, but seldom innocent." A sudden knock interrupted their reverie, and the solicitor, Mr. Atwood, entered. Briskly, his brow creased with concern. "My lord, I have brought further documents, including some recently uncovered ledgers, and a personal diary belonging to Miss Honoria's late husband." "Ah, the key to the household's past," Wimsey remarked, motioning for the papers. "Let us see if the dead speak louder than the living." The diary was bound in worn leather, the pages yellowed but intact. Wimsey's eyes skimmed a passage dated 3 years prior. "The estate's debts weigh heavily. I fear the burden may doom us unless discreet measures are taken. Honoria's inheritance must be preserved for our daughter's sake." He looked up. "There it is. The financial strain that might have driven decisions both legal and personal." Atwood nodded gravely. "The Gillingham fortune was not as secure as it appeared. Miss Honoria's revisions to the will seemed designed to protect Lydia from creditors. So," Wimsey mused, "the stakes extend beyond family discord to the very survival of the estate." Bunter gestured toward another document. "These ledgers show a substantial loan extended to one Mr. Harold Fisk, a rather unsavory character from the village. His repayments have been irregular at best." Wimsey's brow furrowed. "Fisk, a name I have encountered before. A man with a penchant for ill temper and sharper dealings. Could he be the shadow lurking behind the scenes?" He considered the implications. A debt collector desperate for repayment, a woman revising her will to thwart his claims, a household riddled with secrets. The pieces aligned dangerously. "Tell me, Atwood," Wimsey said, "did Miss Honoria ever express concerns about Fisk?" The solicitor hesitated. "She mentioned him once in passing, as a thorn best avoided. But there were letters from him, quite threatening in tone, demanding settlement or else." Wimsey smiled thinly. "Or else what, one wonders?" The telephone bell rang sharply, cutting through the silence. Bunter answered swiftly, then handed the receiver to Wimsey with a raised eyebrow. "Lord Peter Wimsey speaking." A tense female voice replied, "My lord, this is Nurse Hargrove from the village. I have something to report concerning Miss Honoria's condition the night she died." Wimsey's interest piqued. "Go on." "There was a visitor late that evening, just before 10. A man unknown to me who insisted on seeing Miss Gillingham despite my protests. He left hurriedly when confronted, but I overheard raised voices through the study window." Wimsey exchanged a glance with Bunter. "And the nature of these voices?" "Agitated. Urgent. Something about the papers and keeping the secret." The line went dead. Wimsey set down the receiver thoughtfully. "A visitor in the final hour. Voices in dispute. This may prove crucial." He rose and retrieved his coat. "Come, Bunter, we must visit Nurse Hargrove and learn more about this visitor." The journey to the village was damp and overcast, the roads slick with mud from recent rains. Nurse Hargrove's cottage was modest, surrounded by a tangle of herbs and wildflowers, a stark contrast to the imposing Rookery. She welcomed them with a nervous smile, inviting them in with a tentative gesture. "I didn't think to mention it before, my lord, but the man was quite insistent. Tall, dark-haired, and spoke with an accent not local to these parts." Wimsey's mind whirred. "Accent, you say? Could you place it? London, perhaps continental?" "Perhaps London, though I could not be certain. He seemed urgent, desperate even. Did he leave any object behind? A calling card? A note?" The nurse shook her head. "Nothing, I'm afraid. But when he left, I found this on the windowsill." She handed Wimsey a small scrap of paper, crumpled and torn. Unfolding it carefully, Wimsey read the hastily scribbled words. "Trust no one. The truth lies beneath the ink." Bunter glanced at the note. "Beneath the ink Invisible ink? Wimsey's eyes sparkled. Indeed, the very phrase that has haunted this case. He folded the paper and pocketed it. Thank you, nurse. Your vigilance may have saved us a great deal of confusion. Back in the carriage, Wimsey leaned back, steepling his fingers. The visitor, the cryptic note, the invisible ink, all point to someone with intimate knowledge of Miss Honoria's secrets, someone who feared discovery. Bianca ventured, could it be Mr. Fisk himself, desperate to prevent the new will's revelation? Perhaps, Wimsey replied, but let us not rush to judgment. We must consider all angles, particularly those closer to home. They returned to the Rookery, where the household remained tense, shadows clinging to every corner. Mrs. Cartwright's expression was unreadable. Lydia appeared distracted, and the servants exchanged furtive glances. Wimsey gathered them in the drawing-room, his voice calm but commanding. There is much we do not yet understand, but one thing is certain. The truth is obscured not by ignorance, but by deliberate concealment. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Tomorrow, I shall reconstruct the events of that night with the assistance of all present. Until then, I urge honesty and cooperation. As he retired to his study, Wimsey allowed himself a small smile. The game was growing ever more intricate, but the threads were beginning to unravel, and the invisible ink would soon reveal its final secret. The day dawned grey and listless, the sky a uniform wash of dull lead that seemed to press down upon the Rookery with a weight of unspoken secrets. Lord Peter Wimsey found the atmosphere perfectly suited to the task ahead, a methodical unspooling of truth amid the layers of polite deceit and guarded speech. He settled at the large oak table in the library, inviting each member of the household to recount their movements and observations on the night of Miss Honoria's death. The goal was to reconstruct the chronology with precision, a delicate tapestry of time and place upon which the mystery would either unravel or tighten its grip. The first to speak was Lydia Gillingham, the bereaved daughter, her composure fragile yet resolute. I was at the pavilion, as I told you, my lord, sitting with the governess, Miss Pritchard. We talked of trivialities until close to 10, when I returned to my rooms to find the house in unusual quiet. Wimsey inclined his head. And the pavilion's location, Miss Gillingham? How far from the house would you estimate? About a 5-minute walk, I suppose. Excellent. And the exact time you left? Shortly before 10 o'clock. Very good. And your journey back was uninterrupted? She hesitated. Yes, although the path was slippery with dew. I recall hearing a dog barking somewhere near the stables. Interesting, murmured Wimsey. Thank you, Miss Gillingham. Please, remain available should we need further details. Next came Mrs. Cartwright, the housekeeper, a woman whose stern features betrayed little but whose eyes darted nervously. I was in my quarters most of the evening, she asserted firmly, attending to the household accounts and inventory. No visitors disturbed me. Wimsey's gaze sharpened. You heard no voices, no footsteps beyond your own? Only the usual sounds of the house settling, my lord. Indeed, yet Nurse Hargrove reports a visitor outside the study window. Shortly before 10. Would you have seen or heard this man? Mrs. Cartwright paled slightly but maintained her composure. No, my lord, the study is at the rear and I was occupied upstairs. Very well, you may retire for now. The governess, Miss Pritchard, was next, a prim young woman with an air of nervousness that bordered on fragility. I remember Lydia leaving the pavilion, she said, and shortly after, I heard voices from the direction of the study, raised voices, urgent, though I could not distinguish words. Did the voices sound male or female? A man and a woman, I believe. Wimsey noted this carefully, filing the detail away. Thank you, Miss Pritchard. A useful observation. As the interviewees were dismissed, Wimsey turned to Bunter. The barking dog, you say? Which kennel is nearest the stables? Old Jasper the Mastiff, my lord. He is not given to barking without cause. Precisely. Wimsey rose, his mind alight with possibilities. Come, Bunter. We shall visit the stables. The stable-yard was muddy and silent, save for the faint whinnying of horses. Jasper lay curled by the door, ears pricked as they approached. Wimsey crouched beside the dog. A sentinel, old friend. Did you bark at an intruder? Jasper's tail thumped gently, confirming the suspicion. Wimsey surveyed the area. An open window, faint footprints in the mud, and a small scrap of cloth caught on a nail. Someone approached here, Wimsey remarked, and it seems escaped notice or pursuit. Returning indoors, he convened a quiet conference with Bunter and Atwood. We have voices near the study, a visitor with unknown motives, and a dog disturbed at the stables. There is movement after Lydia's departure. Just before 10, the critical window. Atwood frowned. Could this visitor have been Mr. Fisk, desperate to force Miss Honoria's hand? An alluring hypothesis, Wimsey admitted. Yet the visitor's accent was not local, nor is Fisk known for such discretion. Then who? Wimsey tapped the letter with the invisible ink phrase. Someone with intimate knowledge, perhaps even a double life or hidden agenda. Let us revisit the solicitor's correspondence. There may be clues overlooked. Hours passed in diligent study, and the afternoon sun waned behind clouds. Wimsey's eyes caught on a subtle phrase in a letter, from Miss Honoria to her solicitor. I fear that revealing the new will's contents too soon may bring ruin. Delay is necessary, lest old debts and older enemies stir. Delay, he mused aloud. She intended to keep her intentions concealed until a safer moment. Bunter pointed to another letter. Here, a mention of a meeting at the old mill, a location long abandoned but known for its secrecy. Curious, Wimsey said. Miss Honoria must have met someone there recently, clandestinely. This is no simple matter of paperwork, but a game played in shadows. Night fell, and Wimsey prepared to question the servants again, seeking tiny inconsistencies. He observed the maid, Alice, nervously smoothing her apron. Tell me, Alice, was there anything unusual in the house after 10 o'clock? She glanced about nervously. I heard footsteps on the corridor outside the library, slow and deliberate. And the library door? Was it locked? No, sir, it was slightly ajar. Wimsey's eyes narrowed. The study and the library are adjacent. Might someone have moved between these rooms unnoticed? Alice hesitated. I suppose so, sir. Later, examining the study more closely, Wimsey found a faint but telltale scent of cigar smoke, distinctive and faintly aromatic. He inhaled thoughtfully. A signature, perhaps? He turned to Bunter. The visitor smoked an imported cigar. Fisk's tastes run to cheap tobacco. This is a more refined aroma. Bunter nodded. I have noted that Lord Peter prefers his Havana Robustos at 8:30. Wimsey smiled thinly. Indeed, a detail that may yet prove useful. Before retiring, Wimsey took one last look at the window through which the voices had been overheard. It was left open, a curious lapse in the household's usual fastidiousness. The night air carried a faint chill, and the whisper of leaves stirred by the breeze. He pondered the invisible ink's warning, trust no one. Beneath the polite veneer of the Rookery, something far darker and more complex festered. The puzzle pieces were assembling, but the final picture remained obscured by shadows. Tomorrow would demand a more theatrical approach, a reenactment of sorts, to draw the truth out from its hiding place. Wimsey lit his study lamp, his mind already plotting the steps ahead. The game was far from over, and the invisible ink was beginning to reveal its secret. The following morning at the Rookery unfolded with a crispness that belied the tension threading through its corridors. Lord Peter Wimsey had summoned the household to the drawing-room under the pretense of a reading from Miss Honoria's personal diary. A ruse, of course, to observe reactions and glean further insights. The assembled group included Lydia, the governess Miss Pritchard, Mrs. Cartwright the housekeeper, Alice the maid, and, as an invited but silent observer, Mr. Atwood the solicitor. Wimsey, settling into a high-backed chair with an air of studied leisure, opened the diary to a bookmarked page and began to read aloud in his smooth, measured tones. May 12th. The burden of secrecy grows heavier, as I confide in none but these pages. The invisible ink, my last safeguard, holds the true testament to my wishes. Should the public wills be contested, these lines shall prove my final intent. Allowed the words to hang in the air, watching the faces around him. Lydia blinked rapidly, and Miss Pritchard shifted uneasily, while Mrs. Cartwright maintained her customary stoicism. "The invisible ink," Wimsey continued, "a device to protect the estate from prying eyes, yet also a trap to ensnare those who would seek to manipulate it. A cunning stratagem, but not impervious." He closed the diary and looked toward Mrs. Cartwright. "You oversee the household, madam. Might you recall any occasion when such a method of concealment was discussed or employed?" Mrs. Cartwright's lips pressed thin. "No, my lord. If Miss Honoria confided such matters, it was behind closed doors. I have only overheard vague warnings against unwelcome guests." "Indeed," Wimsey said thoughtfully. "And who might these unwelcome guests be?" Before the housekeeper could respond, Lydia interjected, voice trembling yet firm. "My mother was always wary of Mr. Fisk. He was relentless in his demands and threats. She feared what he might do if he learned of the new will." Wimsey nodded. "A plausible concern, yet Fisk's crude methods make him a blunt instrument, ill-suited to subtlety." Turning to Alice, the maid, he asked, "You mentioned footsteps outside the library. Late on the night in question. Did you see who it was?" Alice glanced down. "No, my lord. The corridor was dim and I dared not look closely, but the steps were slow, measured, certainly not one of the servants rushing about." "A visitor, then," Wimsey murmured. "Possibly. The same man Nurse Hargrove described." He rose, pacing thoughtfully. "We must reconstruct the evening's timeline precisely. Lydia left the pavilion near 10. Voices were heard near the study shortly after. Footsteps by the library. The dog barked near the stables. Each element threads into a sequence not yet fully aligned." Atwood interjected, "Might the meeting at the old mill mentioned in the letters provide a clue? Who met there and when?" Wimsey's eyes gleamed. "A matter demanding immediate investigation. The mill lies a mile from here, abandoned but accessible. If Miss Honoria arranged a secret meeting there, it could reveal allies or enemies unknown." As the household dispersed, Wimsey and Bunter prepared for a visit to the old mill. The journey was bleak, the overcast sky releasing a fine drizzle that slicked the narrow lane. The mill stood in eerie silence, a skeletal remnant of faded industry, its broken windows and rotting timbers casting elongated shadows. Inside, Wimsey's lantern revealed faint footprints in the dust, recent but indistinct. He knelt to examine a scrap of fabric caught on a jagged nail, a dark, fine weave, unfamiliar in the context of the rustic surroundings. Bunter noted, "No sign of forced entry. Whoever visited came and left willingly." Wimsey's mind raced. This was a rendezvous, then, not a burglary or accident. His eyes fixed on the writing etched faintly on the stone floor beneath accumulated dust, a ciphered phrase partially erased but legible enough. "Beneath the ink, truth lies." He whistled softly. The same phrase as on the note Nurse Hargrove found. Suddenly a sound, footsteps crunching in the undergrowth. Wimsey raised a hand for silence. A figure emerged, a man tall and cloaked, his face partially obscured. "By a hat brim." "Mr. Fisk," Wimsey said evenly, "or another with an interest in Miss Honoria's affairs." The man's lips curled in a bitter smile. "I am no fool, Lord Peter. I come because the game's changed, and so must the players." Wimsey's eyes narrowed. "You admit involvement." "Not in murder," Fisk spat, "but I sought to claim what is owed. The invisible ink and secret meetings are tricks to defraud me." "And yet you left no clear path to payment, only threats and bitterness," Wimsey replied. "Tell me, where were you the night Miss Honoria died?" Fisk's gaze flickered. "At my cottage, nursing my wounds. The foolish daughter of Gillingham took a swing at me after a quarrel over debts." Wimsey raised an eyebrow. "An alibi with violent colour. Intriguing. But does it hold under scrutiny?" Fisk grunted, then stalked away into the darkening woods. Returning to the Rookery, Wimsey found the household more restless than ever. He requested the collection of all clocks in the house, noting discrepancies in their settings, a minor point but one that caught his attention. The drawing room filled as servants and family members gathered for the next stage, a meticulous reconstruction of the timeline and movements on the fatal night. Wimsey began by laying out a large floor plan of the house, marking entrances, windows, and key rooms. "We shall trace each step, each sound, and each statement against the clock." The butler, a dour man named Pritchard, noted, "The grandfather clock in the hall struck 10, just after Lydia left the pavilion. The same clock," Wimsey observed, "was later found stopped at 10:15. Miss Pritchard frowned. "It has a known fault. The mechanism sometimes falters." "A detail to consider," Wimsey agreed, "but not a reason to dismiss the timing entirely." He turned to Alice. "You heard footsteps by the library at—" "Shortly after 10, she confirmed. "And you, Mrs. Cartwright?" "I was in my quarters, but I heard no footsteps." Wimsey fixed her with a pointed look. "No footsteps, or no footsteps you care to admit." The housekeeper's expression flickered. "I only heard what I wished to hear, my lord." The assembled company murmured uneasily. "Let us not forget," Wimsey continued, "that soundproofing in a house such as this can deceive even the most attentive ear. The study's door was found unlocked, the window ajar. Someone passed between, rooms unseen." He paused, letting the implications settle. "A secret passage, a hidden presence, or a deliberate misdirection." As the evening wore on, Wimsey's questions grew ever more pointed, the puzzle pieces clicking together with a maddening slowness. Yet the invisible ink's warning loomed over them all. Trust no one. The final act approached, and with it the revelation of truths long hidden beneath layers of ink, shadow, and silence. As the house settled into the silence of the night, Lord Peter Wimsey remained in the drawing-room, the flickering fire casting long shadows across the walls, lined with somber portraits of Gillingham ancestors. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and hidden truths. The invisible ink of deception was beginning to dissolve under the light of scrutiny, but the final revelation remained elusive. Wimsey sat back in his chair, pondering the evening's deductions and the incongruities that refused to align. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily, a metronome against the chaos of uncertainty. The housekeeper's evasiveness, the governess's nervous glances, the butler's taciturn replies, each a thread in the tangled web. "Bunter," he said quietly, "fetch the lantern and join me in the study." The room was still as they entered, the scent of faint cigar smoke lingering, the window left ajar as noted. Wimsey knelt by the desk and examined the blotter once more, the delicate paper seeming to mock him with its invisible secrets. He retrieved a small chemist's lamp and a vial of heat-sensitive reagent from his pocket, a precaution learned from his many encounters with covert documents. He carefully applied the reagent to the blotter, watching as faint lines slowly emerged, faint, but unmistakably there. The invisible ink was indeed a message, one of urgency and betrayal. "The will stands altered. Trust no one. The late hour conceals the true hand." Wimsey read aloud. Bunter, ever the observant, remarked, "A warning to her closest. Confidants, it would seem." "Indeed, but who is the true hand that the late hour conceals?" Wimsey stood, eyes gleaming with purpose. "It is time for a little theatrics. The house shall reveal its secrets tonight." Gathering the household once more, he proposed a reenactment of the night's movements, each person retracing their steps, their timing, and their whereabouts. There was a certain reluctant compliance. After all, to resist the suave Lord Detective's invitation was to invite suspicion. As the clock struck 9, the household followed Wimsey's instructions with meticulous care. Lydia was first, retracing her path from the pavilion to her rooms, the governess shadowing her every step. Alice lingered near the library door, while Mrs. Cartwright and the butler maintained positions near the main hall. Wimsey himself stationed near the study window, observing. The dog Jasper lay placid at his feet, the mastiff's ears twitching in the cool night air. Suddenly a faint sound, a creak, a whisper of fabric, broke the silence. Wimsey's eyes darted to the slightly open study window. A shadow flitted, passed barely perceptible against the darkness. "Halt," Wimsey commanded. The footsteps ceased. Was that anyone present? The group shook their heads, unease rippling through the assembled. Wimsey stepped forward, lifting the window gently. "The lock on this window is unusual. It can be manipulated from both sides." He produced a small tool from his pocket and demonstrated, Clicking the latch open silently. "A clandestine entrance," he murmured. "Our visitor came through here, not the front door." Turning to the group, he said, "This changes our timeline. The visitor arrived after Lydia left the pavilion, but before the household was aware." Miss Pritchard paled. "But who would know to enter this way?" Wimsey's gaze fixed on her. A question well posed. He then motioned to the library, door now wide open. And footsteps heard by Alice, slow, measured, came from this corridor. Someone moved between rooms unseen. Mrs. Cartwright's composure cracked slightly. I was busy with the accounts. I did not hear anything." "Yet your quarters overlook the hall," Wimsey pointed out, "and footsteps near the library should have been audible to you." The housekeeper's eyes dropped. "Perhaps I was mistaken." The atmosphere thickened as Wimsey moved to a large cabinet near the fireplace. He produced a small salver missing from the study, found earlier in the servants' quarters. A detail overlooked, Wimsey noted, yet important. The salver was used to carry refreshments, likely displaced during the visitor's arrival. He placed the salver on the desk and turned toward the group. "It is time for honesty. Secrets cannot be hidden forever." Lydia's voice broke the silence. "I have withheld something. That night I found a letter hidden in my mother's desk. It was unsigned but threatened exposure if the will was changed." Wimsey's brow arched. "An anonymous threat, fitting for our mystery." "Who else knew of this letter?" he asked. "No one," Lydia whispered. "I kept it to myself." "Yet such knowledge shapes behavior," Wimsey mused, "and fear often drives people to desperate acts." As the group digested this, a sudden knock echoed from the hallway. Bunter opened the door to reveal Inspector Parker, summoned by the household, but arriving quietly, unwilling to disturb the proceedings. "Good evening, Lord Peter," Parker greeted. "I understand you are conducting a reconstruction." "Indeed," Wimsey replied. "We seek to untangle truth from deception." Parker nodded grimly. "The police have uncovered something curious in the mill. A letter addressed to Miss Honoria, signed by her late uncle." Wimsey's interest piqued. "This will be illuminating." The letter read aloud revealed that Honoria's uncle had altered the original will, and that an heir had been disinherited, an act contested in secret. This revelation added a new dimension, a hidden motive far beyond debts or threats. Wimsey gathered the household once more. Our visitor was not merely a creditor or angry suitor, but a claimant to the estate, one who stands to lose everything if the invisible will is revealed. He paused, letting the weight of his deduction settle. The visitor entered through the study window, moved stealthily between rooms and planted evidence to mislead. The barking dog, the misplaced salver, the faulty clocks, all part of a stage sequence. Then who? Mrs. Cartwright breathed. "The answer lies in those with opportunity, knowledge, and the most to gain," Wimsey said softly. "Yet, more than that, in the subtle contradictions in testimony and behavior." He fixed his gaze on the butler, Mr. Pritchard, who shifted uneasily. "You knew of the secret will and its invisible ink, did you not?" The butler's face tightened. "I only served, my lord. Yet you had access to the study, knew the household's routines, and a motive to protect the Gillingham legacy." A bead of sweat traced Pritchard's temple. "You mistake my loyalty for guile." "Loyalty, yes, but to whom?" Wimsey pressed. "To the rightful heir, or to a false inheritance?" At that moment, a sudden commotion erupted in the hallway. Lydia cried out, "The study window, it is closed and locked!" Wimsey rushed to the window and examined it closely. The lock was engaged firmly, no sign of recent tampering. Yet moments ago it had been ajar. A sinister thought dawned. Someone has been here, watching, waiting. He turned swiftly. The final act approaches, and with it, the unveiling of the invisible ink's secret. The household stood frozen, caught between dread and anticipation. The night's shadow deepened, but within the darkness the razor edge of truth was poised to strike. The sudden closing of the study window cast a chill through the gathered assembly, as though the house itself exhaled a long-held breath. Wimsey's eyes narrowed, the usual arch of his brow deepening into a frown. The locked sash, once ajar, now an impenetrable barrier, an impossibility unless someone had returned unseen, or was still within the house's labyrinthine passages. "Most curious," he murmured, pacing toward the fireplace where the shadows from the flames flickered like phantom fingers. A closed window that was open, and a locked door with no key used. A locked room mystery, one might say, though our room is but a study and the mystery more subtle. Inspector Parker observed with a measured calm. "We have swept the grounds, my lord. No sign of an intruder lurking about. The household is accounted for, save this window incident." "Indeed, which compels us to consider the possibility that our visitor is none other than one among us," Wimsey replied, his voice silk over steel. "That the visitor's footsteps and shadow were but a manifestation of a carefully constructed ruse." He turned to Mr. Pritchard, the butler, whose composure now seemed frayed. "You profess loyalty, yet your knowledge is too precise, your presence too timely." Pritchard swallowed, his fingers tightening involuntarily on the chair's edge. "My lord, I have served this family for many years, and I would not sully my name with deceit." "Of course," Wimsey said smoothly, "which is precisely why you felt confident to manipulate those very loyalties." Lydia, standing close by, glanced nervously at Pritchard. But if not the butler, then who? Who else would know of the invisible will and have motive enough for such subterfuge? Before anyone could reply, a soft rustling came from the adjoining corridor, and the governess, Miss Hargrave, suddenly stepped forward. Her pale face was resolute now, no longer trembling. "I have something to confess," she said quietly. "I have kept silent, fearing scandal and disgrace, but I witnessed the shadow near the study window. The room's attention snapped to her. I was returning to my quarters when I noticed a figure, small, furtive, slipping out just as I passed the hall. I dared not speak, fearing reprisal. But now I believe it must be said." Wimsey's gaze sharpened. "A small figure? That contradicts the assumption that the visitor was the butler or one of the taller household staff." "Yes, my lord. It was Miss Honoria herself," Miss Hargrave said, trembling slightly. "She had slipped away after dinner, perhaps to make a secret visit." The assembled gasped. Honoria, the late Mrs. Gillingham's niece, so quiet, so demure. Now under suspicion, Wimsey approached the governess with a faint smile. "Thank you, Miss Hargrave. Your honesty aids the course of justice." Turning to the rest, he said, "Miss Honoria's presence near the window explains the open sash, and her motive may lie in the letter revealing the will's alteration." Footsteps sounded behind them, and Honoria entered the room, her eyes wide but steady. "Lord Peter," she began, voice firm yet tinged with sadness, "I came to plead with my aunt to reconsider the will. She had promised me her estate once her affairs were settled. The new will, invisible as it may be, threatens my future." Wimsey nodded thoughtfully. "A motive, certainly, yet mere motive does not suffice. Tell us, Miss Honoria, what transpired." "That night?" She hesitated, then recounted her furtive visit to the study, her attempt to find her aunt to change her mind, and her discovery of the invisible ink message, which terrified her. She left quietly, hoping to seek counsel elsewhere before confronting the household. Wimsey listened intently, the pieces falling into sharper relief. "Yet if you left the study window open, how was it later closed and locked?" he mused aloud. "Perhaps by someone wishing to conceal your presence," Inspector Parker suggested. "A means to divert suspicion." "Indeed," Wimsey agreed, "but the question remains, who stood to benefit from such deception?" He glanced at the assembled household, eyes pausing on Mrs. Cartwright, who now seemed unusually pale. "Mrs. Cartwright," Wimsey said, "you have remained silent through much of this, but you hold keys not only literal but figurative." The housekeeper swallowed, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes, my lord, I was the one who closed the window. I feared that Miss Honoria's secret visit might unleash chaos. I wished only to protect the family's reputation." "A noble impulse, with unfortunate consequences," Wimsey remarked dryly. "Yet your interference clouds the timeline and feeds suspicion." He paced slowly, then stopped before the group. "Our puzzle now rests on 3 pillars: the invisible will, the mysterious visitor, and the timing of actions that night." "Lord Peter," Lydia interjected, "there was the matter of the clocks. Miss Hargrave mentioned the hall clock was slow that evening." "Ah, yes," Wimsey replied, "the clocks, a seemingly trivial detail that may hold the key." He fetched the pocket watch he always carried and compared its time to that of the mantel clock. An entire 7 minutes. Slow. This discrepancy may explain the conflicting testimonies regarding arrivals and departures, meaning the timeline given by several witnesses is off, Parker said thoughtfully. Precisely, Wimsey agreed, and given the deliberate nature of the misset clocks, someone intended to manipulate alibis. He turned to the group. Who among you had access and motive to adjust the clocks? Mrs. Cartwright's eyes flicked nervously to Mr. Pritchard, who looked equally uncomfortable. Both the butler and housekeeper would have had the opportunity, Wimsey observed, yet only one seems to have misled us with subtler artifice. He approached Mr. Pritchard again. You claimed ignorance of the letter discovered at the mill, yet your handwriting was identified on the anonymous note threatening exposure. Pritchard's face paled. I was only trying to protect the family's honor, and in doing so you staged a diversion, planting evidence and adjusting clocks to frame Miss Honoria or another, Wimsey concluded. Pritchard collapsed into a chair, his resistance broken. Yes, I feared the consequences of the new will. The Gillingham name must be preserved. Yet the true author of the invisible will, the late lady herself, foresaw such treachery, Wimsey said softly, and encoded her wishes so cleverly that only a discerning eye could uncover them. He moved to the blotter, now dry and marked by the invisible ink, then to the letter found at the mill and finally to the timeline, each puzzle piece clicking into place. Mr. Pritchard, your duplicity stemmed from misplaced loyalty. But loyalty cannot be an excuse for deception and endangering lives. The butler lowered his eyes, defeated. Lydia stepped forward. Thank you, Lord Peter. You have restored justice not only to my mother's memory but to this household. Wimsey inclined his head. Justice, dear miss, is a delicate craft, woven from truth, timing, and the faintest scent of human folly. The night had drawn back its curtain, revealing the invisible script of motives, alibis, and betrayals. And as dawn crept upon Gillingham, Manor, the secret will, long hidden in invisible ink, was finally brought to light. The first pale fingers of dawn crept through the high mullioned windows of Gillingham Manor, casting a soft grey light upon the assembled company. The events of the night lay heavy upon them like a thick fog, discomforting, inevitable, and yet finally dissipating under the clarifying scrutiny of Lord Peter Wimsey's mind. The butler sat withdrawn in a corner, his shoulders bowed as if under the weight of his own guilt. The household, once a symphony of quiet murmurs and guarded glances, had fallen into a subdued silence, each person caught in their own reflection upon the night's revelations. Wimsey, however, remained composed, his habitual sardonic wit momentarily tempered by the gravity of the situation. He was a man accustomed to the peculiar dance of human folly and intellect, and in this moment his eyes glimmered with the satisfaction of a puzzle meticulously solved. But he was not yet done. Before we part ways, he said, voice measured and deliberate, there remains one final matter to address, an inconsistency that, though minor, has long troubled my thoughts. All eyes turned toward him. Curiosity piqued anew. You will recall, he continued, that in our earlier interviews, the matter of the shattered glass was touched upon briefly, dismissed as an accident or an inconsequential fragment lost to the housekeeper's broom. Yet accidents seldom break such valuable and rare glassware without cause, and such a fragment, as trivial as it may seem, holds within it a story overlooked. He bent to pick up a small shard from the polished floor near the fireplace, a delicate piece of blue and gold-streaked glass. Holding it up to the light, he turned it slowly, allowing the intricate pattern to catch the dawn's glow. This piece, Wimsey explained, does not belong to the decanter which lay intact on the sideboard, nor does it fit the handle of the silver salver found untouched. It is, in fact, part of the small ornamental box we found locked in Lady Gillingham's writing desk, the very box in which she kept her invisible ink supplies. A murmur passed through the room, and Lydia's face blanched at the recollection. Surely, that box was intact when the household retired for the evening, she said, voice wavering. Not quite, Wimsey replied. The box had been disturbed, and this shard is the telltale sign. Someone must have forced it open, breaking the glass lid in the process. It would appear that our late lady's invisible ink, so cunningly concealed, attracted more attention than we first appreciated. The butler's eyes flickered nervously. betraying a flicker of panic beneath his resigned exterior. Miss Hargrave's lips pressed into a thin line. Honoria's youthful features tightened with unease. "Mr. Pritchard," Wimsey said quietly, "can you enlighten us regarding this?" Pritchard hesitated, then confessed, I feared that the invisible ink might be used to forge documents, or worse, to destroy the family's name further. I opened the box, hoping to find a way to neutralize its contents. I did not intend to break the glass, but in my haste the lid slipped." Wimsey nodded slowly. "An understandable impulse, though ill-advised, but it brings us to a crucial question. Was this act the beginning of a chain that culminated in Lady Gillingham's untimely demise?" He paused, scanning the faces before him, gauging their silent responses. The pieces seemed to align like constellations, each point a clue, each pattern a motive. Consider the timeline once more. The invisible will was penned but a week prior. Her secret only the late lady and possibly her confidants knew. Yet the forged note, the mysterious visitor at the window, and the disruption of household routines all point to an orchestrated attempt to alter the outcome. He raised a slender finger. "Mr. Pritchard, your duplicity is evident, but were you acting alone or merely the instrument of another's design?" The butler's eyes darted, betraying more than his words. I was desperate. But the idea came from Miss Cartwright." The housekeeper started, her composure fracturing. "I deny that, Lord Peter." "Indeed," Wimsey smiled thinly, "but denial is the refuge of those caught unawares." He turned his attention to Mrs. Cartwright, whose usual stern mask slipped to reveal a flicker of fear. "You feared the will's alteration would disinherit your son, did you not? And so you conspired to conceal its existence, enlisting Mr. Pritchard's aid." "I did what was necessary to protect my family," she admitted with a bitterness that was almost pitiable. Wimsey's gaze softened momentarily. "A common human failing, love twisted by fear and greed. But the true crime lies not merely in protection, but in murder." There was a palpable shift in the room's atmosphere, as if the weight of accusation pressed upon the very air. "Mrs. Cartwright, the poison found in Lady Gillingham's tea was no accident. Your presence near the kitchen, your knowledge of the household routines and your opportunity all place you at the scene. Yet more importantly, your motivation is clear." The housekeeper's shoulders sagged. "I did not mean to kill her. I only wanted to delay her discovery of the will's contents, to buy time for a solution that tragically backfired," Wimsey said quietly. He turned to the assembled company. "And so the invisible ink was not merely a clever device to shield Lady Gillingham's final wishes, but the catalyst for a series of desperate acts born of love, fear, and misunderstanding." Wimsey crossed to the window, now bathed in morning light. "This house, like many such, is a vessel of secrets, but it is the sharpness of observation, the precision of logic, and the willingness to peer behind curtains that reveals the truth. Hidden in shadows," he faced the group, a sardonic gleam in his eyes. "And as for our dear Miss Honoria, I trust this ordeal will temper youthful impetuousness with a touch of prudence." Honoria nodded, her eyes bright despite the ordeal. "Inspector Parker," Wimsey said, "I believe the case is closed, the threads untangled, and justice poised to take its due course." The inspector inclined his head. "Indeed, my lord. Thanks to your insight, we have the confession and the means to bring this to a proper conclusion." Wimsey lit a slender cigar, the smoke curling around him like a contemplative fog. "As Shakespeare observed, the truth will out, though sometimes it takes a touch of invisible ink and a keen eye to coax it forth." He smiled, a hint of ironic triumph in his voice. "Now, if you will excuse me, I shall retire for a spot of breakfast before returning to London. Murder, invisible wills, and broken glass make for a rather exhausting evening." With that, Lord Peter Wimsey made his exit, leaving behind a household forever altered, its secrets laid bare under the precise, unyielding light of logic and human frailty. The gathering in the great drawing-room was marked by a peculiar stillness, as though the very walls of Gillingham Manor awaited the final stroke of revelation. Lord Peter Wimsey stood near the mantelpiece, a slender figure in immaculate evening dress, the faint curl of cigar smoke rising as he surveyed the assembled company with that trademark blend of amused detachment and intellectual command. The stage was set, not for a performance but for the unmasking of a truth long concealed beneath layers of deception, human frailty, and the curious whims of fate. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice calm, precise, "it has been a singular privilege to unravel the knotted threads of this most perplexing mystery. Yet despite the myriad distractions, shattered glass, invisible ink, and the spectre of occultist imaginings, there remains but one incontrovertible fact. Murder was not the work of chance, nor born of supernatural influence, but of human calculation and error." He paused, letting his words settle. At first glance, Mrs. Cartwright seemed the obvious culprit, and indeed, her involvement in concealing the will's contents and her desperate attempts to protect her son rendered her culpable in a sense. But the poison in Lady Gillingham's tea was not administered by Mrs. Cartwright alone. A flicker passed over the faces before him. He continued, "It was, in truth, a twofold deception, one of circumstance and one of intent. The poison was introduced not in the tea as served to the lady herself, but rather in the water used to dilute her invisible ink mixture, the very substance upon which the secret will depended." Wimsey stepped forward, drawing from his pocket the small broken vial recovered from the study. This vial, shattered in the struggle, contained a solution tainted with a rare and slow-acting toxin, imperceptible to taste and scent, but fatal. In dosage, he looked to Honoria. "You will recall your discovery of this vial in the study, a seemingly innocuous object lost amidst the clutter." "Yes," she whispered, her face pale but steady. "But who would do such a thing? And, why, Wimsey smiled faintly. "Therein lies the final irony. The poison was intended not for Lady Gillingham herself, but to sabotage the invisible ink, thus erasing the will entirely and preserving the existing testament which favoured none other than Mr. Pritchard." He turned sharply toward the butler, whose composure cracked beneath the gaze. "Your motive was clear. Deprived of inheritance, you sought to destroy the only document which might challenge your position. You knew the invisible ink's fragility, the reliance on its solution's purity. Pritchard's protest was weak, a flicker of panic betraying his carefully rehearsed denials. But, Wimsey continued, you did not anticipate Lady Gillingham's ingenious foresight. She had prepared a backup, one hidden not in ink but in a cipher embedded within her commonplace correspondences, subtle and cryptic. Wimsey turned to Lydia, who blushed slightly, but nodded in recognition. "Indeed," the young woman admitted, "she confided in me, teaching me the cipher as a safeguard should the invisible ink fail. So," Wimsey said, "the very efforts to obliterate her testament only hastened its revelation." He looked once more at the company assembled, a twinkle of ironic triumph in his eyes. "Murder is a pastime too grave for haphazard bungling. Our culprit, Mr. Pritchard, underestimated both the ingenuity of the deceased and the persistence of human justice." Inspector Parker stepped forward, his expression a mixture of respect and relief. "Well deduced, my lord. I shall take it from here." Wimsey nodded and turned to Honoria, placing a light hand on her shoulder. "My dear Miss Gillingham, you have demonstrated both courage and intellect. The path of truth is seldom easy, but it is always the noblest." As the household dispersed, weighed down by the revelation yet strangely relieved, Wimsey paused at the doorway, casting a final glance at the stately rooms, now forever altered by the events just past. Lighting another cigar, he mused quietly. "In the end, as the bard reminds us, the web of our life is of a mingled yarn, good and ill together, and it is the detective's task to unravel that web with patience, wit, and a healthy disdain for the supernatural." With that he stepped out into the morning air, leaving behind the shadows of Gillingham Manor, and the invisible ink that had almost written a different destiny.